How is everybody doing? Hope everybody's doing well. I'm hanging in there. I'm pro se now, so I guess I'm acting as Esquire. I'm Esquire. I'm Hillbilly Esquire. Let's call ourselves Hillbilly Esquire. And I'm representing myself pro se. I just filed my first motions today, 3 of them to be exact. So that's always fun. 100 and some, I think 104 pages total, plus a what would I call it? Supplemental exhibit that I added. So should definitely get something going. Like I said, because the piece of shit that I had before, well, my previous counsel was just in it for himself. So took care of that, and you know, Hank Greenwood. He's a very good attorney. He's the oldest practicing attorney in Michigan, and thank God for him. Shout out to you, Hank. Hope you're doing well. Hope that cancer is how do I say? Hope that cancer gets its ass kicked and you beat it. I'm pulling for you, man. But anyways, I figured I'd check in with you guys. The channel is not going anywhere. As far as the work that we're going to be continuing to engage in. Um, right now, with all this bullshit, this vague and void and phantom bullshit, don't worry, we're gonna be taking care of that. Because like I said, I can't talk about, May 9th. I can't talk about that, and I can't talk about, what is it, July 10th? Can't talk about those dates. But I can talk about May 19th, May 17th. I can talk about March 28th of 2024. I can talk about Blackwell versus No Serini 2022. I can talk about Hawthorne versus City of Wayne 2018, independent workplace assessment, retaliatory workplace culture. We can talk about what they did to Mark Blackwell and, charged him with stalking, and how they're using the same MO against me. June 3rd, when the city clerk, Tina Parnell, slammed a door into my side on video in front of the chief of police, in front of 2 cameras, and then they claimed that they could not discern the main camera. They couldn't discern it. They couldn't discern the footage, but it's been nearly 3 months, and we FOIA'd it 3 months ago, and they just don't seem to think that they have to follow the law, I guess. They actually told us that we could get it in discovery, despite the fact that they supposedly investigated it, and then they closed the investigation out on June 10th. But somehow, in July and August, they were claiming that we could get it during discovery, which is that's an interesting one. That's, like I said, the nature of scummery. These people know no bounds. I mean, they are the lowest of the low. And basically, they will weaponize phantom ordinances against you. Ordinances that have been repealed, that aren't even codified, that have been repealed. They'll just, weaponize those into, vague and capricious criminal charges. And then, ruin your life over it because you know, decided to run for mayor and you got involved in politics. And, because I'm an abolitionist of property taxes, that's my thing, axe my tax. I'm one of the captains in Wayne County for that movement, a statewide movement in the state of Michigan to eliminate property taxes, especially residential property taxes. I mean, that's what I'm set here to do on earth, I'm an abolitionist of property taxes. And I don't pay any property taxes because I'm exempt through the state of Michigan, Michigan disabled veteran, 100% disabled veteran homestead exemption. And I also conveniently have the highest taxed residential lot parcel in the entire city of Wayne, 1,740 square foot house, and my value, according to this city, is $358,000. But somehow my taxes are 96 or 9,700. Kind of crazy when you do the math on that. That's over 3% annual tax rate, which is double the Michigan average and basically triple the country average. So, we turn them into the Michigan Tax Commission. We have a letter from the Michigan Tax Commission investigating my parcel, trying to figure out, man, what's going on here. But, like I said, they like to paint a narrative that, you're just a menace to society, even though you've never been in trouble in your life, and you have, dozens and dozens of, character witnesses, and, you graduated from military college and you're retired from the army, right? But, they'll try to paint you as a menace to society because that's in their interest, and they don't want to contextualize, well, what's surrounding all of this madness, right? And it involves, like I said, my property taxes being the highest net negative in the city of Wayne, as well as being an abolitionist of property taxes. And my mayoral campaign, my platform is to annex the neighborhoods of John Hicks and Glenwood into Westland or Canton in John Hicks' case, but definitely in my neighborhood, Glenwood, about 103 residential parcels plus the Dollar Tree over there at the corner of Newburgh and Glenwood. So, that's my platform is to annex that neighborhood, and John Hicks and preferably the whole west side of Wayne and then possibly, up until the tracks. I don't think the east side of Wayne is viable. I don't think it's, I look at the city of Wayne as two separate cities, right? You have west of the tracks, then you have east of the tracks. And, I live on the west side of the town, northwest side. And, for me, it just, it makes more sense to just focus in on my neighborhood. And I'm right in the middle of the Glenwood neighborhood. I'm in the, biggest lot, 2.8 acres. And, it's half, 2/3 of it's a wetland protected by the state of Michigan. And there's a, drain that splits my property roughly in half called the Hunter Drain. And that flows down into the lower River Rogue or Rug. And yeah, it's a big deal over there. It's all developed, and I have really the only show in town when it comes to a wetland. And so, I've been having problems with the city of Wayne. I mean, listen, the city of Wayne trespassed on my curtilage back in March of 24, March 28th of 24. We have a fire report where they knocked on the door. They claimed they knocked on the door and then they walked in the backyard and then they grabbed a bucket of water out of my pool and they dumped it over my fire ring because, they didn't think I was home or something, right? And it just goes to show, I mean, that's their policy, custom, and tradition. That is how they just act like the Fourth Amendment doesn't even exist. They act like the 14th Amendment doesn't even exist, right? Like you don't get any due process. They can arbitrarily, vaguely call anything they want an emergency or a nuisance or whatever. They don't even have to give you a reason. And then they can cite you some phantom ordinance that's been repealed, right? And then use that as a basis to come on your property and invade your rights. And then you're just supposed to, I guess, just bend over and take it and lick the boot. And then if you don't, well, then you get charged with disorderly conduct or interference or something like that, right? I mean, just whatever catch-all bullshit charge they want to throw at you. And then there you go. And then now now you got a criminal case, and now you got to go and, go to an arraignment, and, you're not getting told your charges, and, you're not getting a discovery before an arraignment in the state of Michigan. I learned that apparently that's just how it works, I guess. I mean, you're not allowed to have a discovery and know what you're being charged with, and all that. You just get to go to an arraignment and get rushed in like cattle. And then it's like, what? How do you plead guilty, not guilty, no contest? And you're like, well, I would like to establish the validity of these charges. I would like to establish, probable cause for these charges, and you're not even afforded the ability to do that. You're just rushed through like, oh, you'll get a chance later on, after you're in this system, this legal system. It's really eye opening. It's really eye opening. And so yes, these May 19th. So I mean, March 28th of 24, that's when my problems began, about 28 days after I moved in, right? I had problems. These people instigated violence against me, right? And it's just been one thing after another, where you've had to not only deal with their incompetence on basically every facet of the government level. I mean, you've had to deal with incompetence from, I have, from the fire department, from the police department, from the building and engineering department, from the district court, 29th district court. I mean, although, I will say the other judge, that I had for the, dumping in my ravine, that was, that was a good outcome. But outside of that, I mean, I've just dealt with incompetence, and then I've dealt with vindictiveness, malicious incompetence, right? Where people don't like the fact that you talk loud. I'm sorry that I'm, partially deaf because of Meniere's disease. I'm sorry that I have hyperacusis, and I'm sorry I wear hearing aids, and, I'm hard of hearing. And, sometimes, I talk loud because I have ADHD. I have, learning disabilities. And so I've had a traumatic brain injury. It's like I'm I'm different, right? Neurodivergent, right? And so it's just like, weaponizing your genetic traits and turning them into criminal things, right? Like, I've never been charged with a crime in my life. I've never been convicted of a crime in my life, and I've never been convicted of a crime in my life. And so 32 years on this planet with, zero record to speak of, and then now all of a sudden you just, you're catching cases like you're catching fucking, mosquito bites, right? When you're by the swamp. It's just like, nothing that I'm doing has changed in my life. I just, like I said, when you start contextualizing everything that's transpired, then it starts to make more sense, right? When you start looking at Veterans Pond, Zook Pond, right? I got on the radar. I mean, what really prompted me, was a couple things, right? This is how I even became affiliated with politics in Wayne, Michigan. My sidewalk, there was a water main break right in front of my house on the sidewalk. It had been like that for over a year. The previous owner was, begging them to fix it. I was asking them to fix it. I wasn't getting no response. It wasn't until a gentleman on a scooter fell, right? He literally, like one of them little scooters, he was driving, and he fell into it and got stuck in the mud and then tipped over, right? And this guy, disability, clearly like immobile, and I had enough. So I put him on blast on Facebook one day, and within a week, I think it was maybe 2 weeks, it was fixed, right? And it's like that, along with the murder of John Zook Jr. that happened on June 18th of 2024, where they murdered him in his apartment, in his own apartment, in front of his child. You know, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what got me into it, right? And also the Mark Blackwell No Sereni 2022 case, where, they persecuted Mark Blackwell because he dared to speak out against the government, and particularly the city manager at the time. And next thing you know, he's charged with, a couple of crimes plus stalking, right? They charged him with a felony. And then, of course, he got acquitted, and then he sued them and won. And then the city of Wayne police officers lost their qualified immunity, and then they fired the city manager. But nothing's changed, right? The culture is still the same. Everybody, that was there then is still there now, besides the city manager. But everything else is the same, and effectively nothing's changed, right? And then here I come, early 2024, right? And then within a few months of me living in Wayne, they murdered John Zook Jr. They they what do they do? They passed a deck, right? I had a deck built in April when I first moved in, and they passed a deck that was so shitty I had to get a structural engineer involved because the city inspector just rubber stamped it, right? Like he didn't even check for nothing, didn't check the ledger board, didn't check shit. And I had to pay what, 500-600 bucks for that inspection. I mean, it's fraud, right? You're paying money for an inspection. The inspection supposedly to be for safety and structural issues, but then they don't even look at the ledger board, which is the number one structural thing. First thing you would check on a deck is the pillars, the columns, the ledger board, and then you're gonna check the framing, right? They clearly didn't do any of that, and they just charged me for So I had that experience, and then that city inspector, what was his name? Gregory, right? He apologized in front of me, my wife, and two other employees. Said, "Oh, I fucked up, man. That was my bad, right?" And I'm like, "Well, okay, yeah, it was your bad because now I have to, because of your incompetence, because of your lack of training or lack of knowledge or lack of care, I have to pay the price for it." Right? I hire a licensed contractor. I went local. I went with a company out of Wayne, and they built me a dog shit deck, and then they didn't, they admitted, "Oh yeah, we fucked this up and fucked my concrete up, and oh yeah, they'll fix it." They never did. And contact City of Wayne after, and then they let them do a little bullshit patch job, and put some shims instead of making them reframe it and actually fix it, right? They just let them take a shortcut, and that's the City of Wayne, just take shortcuts. Well, that issue happened, and then I was having issues with Veterans Pond, right, with Zook Pond, where the city of Wayne was trying to get me to pay for an in-ground pool ordinance for a pond, right? Brandon Braun put a piece of mail in my mailbox and said, highlighted the in-ground pool ordinance, right after I announced the project, and yeah, it was just very peculiar. And they want me to pay for an in-ground pool permit. They want me to have it fenced in, and we're talking about a wetland improvement project, a pond, an aquatherapy medical project. Got a prescription through my doctor with the VA to have aquatherapy for spinal stenosis and back pain. Yeah, sorry about that. So then man, what the hell was I even saying? The phone cut off. But yeah, like I'm sitting here dealing with this. They want me to pay for an in-ground pool permit because the city of Wayne doesn't have a pond ordinance because they've never had a registered body of water. They've never had a body of water, or they've never had a pond ever in 250 years. So they obviously, me running as a write-in candidate for mayor because I couldn't be on the official ballot because I didn't meet the residency requirement, right? Trust me, had I been in the city long enough, I would have been on the ballot, and I will always be on the ballot, and so will my wife. Me and her both will be on the ballot every election, without exception. At least for the next 3 or 4, right? We'll be on the ballot every single time. So that's just another announcement, right? Because I know they like to try to downplay and, oh yeah, he was just a write-in, right? Like yeah, the current mayor of Detroit was just a write-in, right? It's a bullshit argument. It's not even an argument. And then it's disingenuous because you're not explaining the context of it, right? Well, I couldn't be on the ballot, so you're gonna hold because of time, right? Because I didn't move to the city. The house wasn't even on the market. It's a lazy argument, but they just were fucking with me about this pond, and you know just obstructing it. And then once they figured, oh well, it's not even City of Wayne. It's the property is regulated through the state of Michigan, right? That pond area is a wetland. It's protected by Eagle. And so, they had no jurisdiction over it. And then the property, leading into the pond or, in the wetland is also shared, there's an easement with the Wayne County Drain Commission. So you got the county, you got the state, and then of course you got the VA, Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment. And, the medical side, right? The VA doctor approving it for aquatherapy. I mean, there's, 4 different reasons, 3 different, levels of government that have either sponsored or approved this project. State of Michigan did. They did 2 permits. Wetland Improvement Project is what it's called. And so, the fact that they were trying to obstruct that, that in itself is proof that, clearly these people are, you know, not reasonable. Let's just put it that way, right? And they weren't reasonable in Mark Blackwell, no Serini case, 2022. They were vindictive, and the opposite of reasonable, vindictive. And that's how they are with me. They're vindictive, right? Where they, like I said, like to just trigger people and push their buttons, right? And just the law be damned, they'll just weaponize whatever they want against you. Well, here's what they did, right? I mean, May 19th, right? Let's skip forward a little bit, right? So we talked about March 28, 2024, where the fire department trespassed on my curtilage. Well, let's skip forward a little bit, right? We're gonna skip ahead a little bit. There was more shit that occurred, but we'll just skip ahead for right now. I want to talk about May 19th. Well, May 19th was a very, very, very fucking interesting day. I mean, that was really the climax of all this. And there were a dozen police officers, 12 in my front yard, and I want to say 3 or 4 in my backyard, plus 2 fire trucks. There was like 12 people in one fire truck. I mean, there was literally 30, 40 people at my house from the city of Wayne on May 19th. And the city of Wayne claims, they say flat out, we don't even have a police report from that day. There's a citizen's complaint that I made where on video we show Officer Jay Sermon assaulting and battering me, pushing up on me, initiating contact with me, stalking me in my yard, following me and stalking me in my yard, threatening me, right? That's assault. And then the battery is, putting his hand on your chest and shit, right? Because they were waiting. They were at the ready. They had a dozen cops just sitting there waiting, and they were just waiting for me to take one false step, or to fight back, right? And then I would have been dead. And that's all that was. That was just the ultimate form of intimidation, and um, it's anguish is what it is. And so that's what they did. They trespassed on my curtilage. They didn't have a warrant. They didn't have probable cause. They didn't have a consent. They didn't have exigent circumstance. And they were claiming that I was violating an ordinance, and that's what's in their, fire reports. And then, in some of the police reports, like I said, on this day, May 19th, there is no police report at all, right? Even though they were there at my house for 30 some minutes, or probably longer than that. And there was literally the whole police and fire department out there, basically, essentially. And yet they don't have a police report at all from that day. They actually told me Westland had it, right? And then we went down to Westland, and that's on my YouTube channel, and they said no, we only had one police officer out there. We just assisted the city of Wayne. So they had a police report that just said we assisted the city of Wayne. That was the extent of their police report. But the city of Wayne claims Deputy Chief Finley Carter on video says there is no police report from May 19th. But yet he investigated it though, right? That's what he says. They said that they did a thorough investigation of the incident. And of course, I submitted evidence, like actual like video evidence and picture evidence of like, hey, here's like him literally putting his hands on me, right? And when they first walked up to the house and they were hawking loogies right in the yard, first thing they did, spit right in the yard. I mean, it's all very telling, right? And then they're talking about like, what's the spin, and how are we going to spin this? And they clearly, like I said, they're sitting there saying I'm violating an ordinance. Well, they don't mention which one. They just hand you an open burn or controlled fire policy, right? It's a patchwork job of like multiple authoritative bodies, right? And then it has a little litany list of ordinances on it. And then the only ordinance on that even would even pertain potentially to a fire pit is 1278 and 1278.07, right? Which, okay, let's go see what 1278 and 1278.07 says. Oh, wait a minute, it's been repealed. And it says so on the city website. It says so on the Codified Book of Ordinances, or whatever it's called, American Legal Publishing, and it's the City of Wayne website, City of Wayne. You want to look up, their ordinances or their codes. It directs you to that. And you're looking on it and you're like, wow, these are phantom ordinances. These ordinances have been repealed. Not that even if they hadn't, it still would be unconstitutional, but it adds a whole nother layer of fuckery. It was 68 Charlie. 68 Charlie. Nort Rum. D. Nort Rum. So yeah, these ordinances that they're claiming that I'm violating don't even exist. So you're like, huh. And then you look up chapter 12.1, which is their nuisance. It's their nuisance policy, and it talks about how the city council must investigate, and then they must notify you in writing, and then they must allow you a chance to. I mean, this is assuming they're declaring what you're doing a nuisance, right? Which is a pretty subjective term, but you know, the city council has to basically approve it. They have to go through an investigation. They have to afford you due process. They have to give you ample, notification, ample time to abate the nuisance. And then if you don't, well, then they got to basically meet again, and they can assess it on your taxes. So they can, like, okay, let's say your yard is looking like a junkyard. They can send somebody in, yeah, medical, licensed vocational nursing specialist. So, I mean, it's all bullshit, guys. I mean, it's all bullshit. 1278 doesn't exist. You can't find it because it's been repealed. So they're literally trying to enforce a phantom ordinance that doesn't exist. So it's beyond void for vagueness. It's it's varies. It varies. It doesn't even exist. And so it's a really, really, really fucked up situation to be being harassed and having police trespass on your property, come right in your backyard. Your curtilage is your house, Jardines, Florida. So basically, having the police come to your house, documented, and the fire department 4 times. It's really fucking horrifying. And then when you look and see that, oh, wait a minute, the alleged ordinance that they've never cited me for this alleged violation of an ordinance, they've never cited me for that. They just decide interference or beat your ass, I guess, or whatever. That seems, because why did they never cite me for the ordinance violation? Because there is no ordinance violation. That's why it's been repealed. So essentially, I did well. Essentially, I've had my rights violated 4 separate occasions for an ordinance that doesn't exist, for a phantom ordinance that doesn't exist. And you're like, wow, well, that's eye opening, and it makes sense why they it just makes sense. It starts to make more sense once you start kind of knowing the context of it, right? And once you kind of know that this is about politics and taxes and my political beliefs. I mean, it's my political speech, right? I believe that local governments are parasites, and the reason they are is because they basically have unlimited access to property taxes, where they can just run the bill up more and more and more and more. And here I come, and I'm like, basically like they're like crackheads, right? Where you just got to take the crack pipe out of their mouth and say, okay, enough of that, no more for you, right? And so here I am, basically I'm the drug counselor, going up to these parasitic, local government officials, and I'm saying, hey, I'm going to take your crack pipe out of your mouth. I'm going to take your stash away, and I'm going to take your fucking rock and your pipe from you, right? And so obviously, they don't like that. And then they don't, of course, like me talking about Mark Blackwell versus No Serini 2022, or the independent workplace assessment that they try to delete off of Facebook and off the, city council meeting, live, right? They try to scrub it after the meeting, right? And yeah, I mean, you just look at the whole thing, and then it got leaked. The independent workplace assessment got leaked to the Michigan State Police, unredacted. Basically a whistleblower, because there was 19 people that were interviewed, city of Wayne employees, and that's what the conclusion was by the expert, that there was a, clearly hostile and retaliatory workplace environment. And then, of course, Mark Blackwell versus No Sereni 2022. Well, that just proved it. That proved it beyond any reasonable doubt. And so now, the city of Wayne is like kind of got a reputation for being kind of dirty and corrupt. And then they murdered John Zook Jr. and John Zook Sr. He's a retired police officer and fireman. And so murdering a police officer's son, in front of his child, in his own house. I mean, it's just, you look at the body camera and it's clear as day that was an execution. And the same police officer who executed John Zook Jr. has been over to my house several times for a fire pit that the city of Wayne approved. Right, it was there when I bought the house. It was approved by the Building and Engineering Office, and then a phantom ordinance. Right, so it's just more pattern of misconduct, of retaliation, conspiracy to violate First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, and 14th Amendment, probably more. I just it really traumatizes me to even have to think about this shit still, or to even have to deal with it. I mean, it's soul sucking, right? It sucks the soul out of you. And you're on your property, right? You just want to be left alone. You just want to be in the sanctity of your house. You want to have your own dominion and your own your own sanctuary, and a place that you can escape and be with your family and your children, and you know be able to practice your religion, and conduct your affairs and live in peace and live in harmony and quiet. And then you just have just random government employees showing up unannounced, you know, just here they are, in your house, and telling you what you're going to do, giving you a false dilemma, false dichotomy. You're going to do this or that, acting like there's not more than one, they're trying to act like there's not more than two choices here. Right, like they act like that like they make it seem like they have no choice, right? Like they have to do this, right? They try to act like, well, we don't want to do this, but we have to do it. And then you're like, well, no, that this whole thing is make believe. You don't have, you don't even have an ordinance that you can show me that even says that what you're doing is lawful, which of course it's not, right? Even if you had an ordinance that said what is clearly unconstitutional, it's void for vagueness, and it can't violate the Fourth Amendment. But you don't even have an ordinance, so you're just like, wow, you're just here because you want to fuck with me, and you're escalating and escalating and instigating and instigating and instigating. And then you turn around and you characterize me as being somehow, the aggressor here. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. It's not how it works at all. It's called, 14th Amendment is what it's called. And so they don't obviously like the Constitution, and, that's not what they don't, they're not constitutional lawyers, right? They're not constitutionalists. They don't believe in that. Right, they believe in their version of the legal system, right, which is get 99% of people to take a plea because they put you in 24-hour solitary confinement at the Wayne County Jail, right? They'll just put you in 24-hour solitary confinement, give you no medical attention whatsoever, not give you any medications. You could be prescribed a dozen medications, and all of a sudden now you just don't have anything. And just the gaslighting is just unbelievable. And then to be like, just perpetually stuck in like not even a pretrial a setting, right? You're perpetually stuck in like this hamster wheel, right? And you start realizing very quickly, you're like, wow, this is not designed to this is designed to create prior restraint, is what it's designed to do. It's designed to break you mentally and physically, is what it's really truly designed to do. But it's really designed for prior restraint, so that way you won't even dare consider exercising your amendments, right? It's designed to chill your freedom, your civil rights. It's designed to chill those. First and Second Amendment, and Fourth Amendment, and 14th Amendment, and Fifth Amendment, right? It's designed to get you to chill that, right? Prior restraint. And so, yeah, I mean, they're just trying to beat you into submission and obedience, and intimidate the shit out of you and your family, and your tenants and your business, and your job, and your vocation, and everything. I mean, that's just it's just designed to inflict as much anguish as humanly possible, because they don't like you, because they don't agree with your politics, and you embarrass them, right? Because you start talking about all their dirty laundry, and you start talking about it live and off the cuff, and yeah, that's obviously right. I mean, that's not rocket science to figure this out, right? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, if you're a corrupt piece of shit, and somebody's talking about your corrupt piece of shit ways, I mean, that obviously you have you have an incentive to squash that. I'm trying to think what the word would be. You have an incentive to chill that communication, right? To chill that chatter, right? I mean, you don't like. I mean, it's just shit ain't rocket science, people. I mean, political activists and abolitionists, have been targeted since the country was founded. I mean, abolitionists of slavery, right? I mean, abolitionists now, I mean, more so it's like abolitionists of abortion. And it's just, yeah, an abolitionist has always been the target of the government. And, I mean, it's pretty scary shit. But, like I said, it took me a minute to get it, but I mean, it's May 19th, right? May 19th and June 3rd. You know, those were the days. Those are the days that I'm talking about. And those are the days that, June 3rd, especially, right? Like, you had a door slammed into you on camera. The person who slammed the door into you admits that she closed the door while you were standing holding it, while you were standing in front of it, or behind it, I guess, in front of it, depending on, where you're looking at it from. But yeah, openly admits it, right? That, oh yeah, I closed the door into him, but it didn't take me much effort. So that, I guess, somehow makes it justified or something. I don't know how it's not even an argument. But yeah, I mean, so you get a door slammed into you. The police report says that the perpetrator admitted it, and then the police are downplaying it. They're trying to minimize it and downplay it, while at the same time they're writing in there that I was loitering in the parking lot, which is the same language, by the way, that they used against Mark Blackwell to charge him with stalking. They were claiming, oh, he was loitering in the parking lot after city council meetings, and that was somehow indication that he was you know they weaponized it, right? They characterized it like he was loitering. He was up to no good. Even though, mind you, this parking lot, it not only is used for City Hall. It's the only parking lot that you can use for the city council meeting, right? You go to the city council meeting, that's where you park. But it also is shared with the main central park, Gowdy Park, right? So that's just another inconvenient little factoid that they like to kind of leave out, right? This park is huge, and it's a big ass parking lot, and you know the fact that they would even insinuate that a taxpayer, anybody, any person who's legally, lawfully allowed to be in America, but especially a taxpayer, a resident, that they're loitering in their city, they're loitering in the Gowdy Park City Hall parking lot. I mean, after a city council meeting, right? So it's like, I mean, that's what they used in the police report to downplay, basically framed it as if I was there up to no good, like I had no lawful business to be there, right? And then, minimized and downplayed the city clerk assaulting me, and was like, oh yeah. I mean, it's just how it's written. It's very telling, right? It's very subtle to some people, but to someone who can kind of put two and two together, it's pretty pretty easy to figure this out. You know, you start looking at how they characterize, what type of words they use, and you're like, okay, so she admits it in the police report, but you're not going to press charges against her. And there's 2 videos of it, but you can't discern from the main front camera to City Hall, not the one on the outside, but the one on the inside. As soon as you walk in, it can't discern it. And it's like, yeah, while I'm wearing a big yellow vest, it can't discern it. And it's like, how convenient. But they also don't want to release the footage. We FOIA'd it, back in June. Case was closed on June 10th, and they still haven't released the FOIA footage. They still haven't released it. They're claiming, oh, well, you got to get it in discovery, which, implies that there's an open case or criminal charges, which there's not. So it's very, very fucked up. And then to make matters worse, the same prosecutor who's not picking up charges is going to represent the perpetrator in the PPO. Because I filed the PPO because of that incident, and then also on June 11th, the day after the police report was closed, the same city clerk stalked my wife's Facebook profile and followed her on Facebook on a Tuesday at like 1 o'clock, right during work hours, using taxpayer dollars to stalk a woman private Facebook page, right? And it's just like, yeah, it's very concerning, especially when you look at the context of everything else, all the improprieties, yeah, I mean, it's like, pretty scary shit. So I requested a PPO, and then the same attorney, the city attorney who's, doing what they're doing is also going to represent the perpetrator in the PPO hearing, which is in violation of MRPC 1.7, conflict of interest. But that's just, that's just how corrupt these people are, man. I mean, they really, truly are. The city of Wayne, Michigan is just the scum of the earth. I mean, it really is. And, I mean, there's good people there. I mean, a lot of the taxpayers are great, but I mean, as far as like the power apparatus, no, the city, the entity corporation itself is probably the worst in Michigan, one of the worst in the United States. It's that dirty. It's most dirty in Wayne County. And it's fucked up. It's fucked up to know that all of this started over. And what I mean by that is like, May 19th, right? I mean, all this shit started over a phantom ordinance. But really it started before that. I mean, it really started, like I said, March 28th to 24. The fire department, they started this whole thing. I had my car parked in the garage. They put in the fire report, oh, we didn't think anybody was home. So they can just walk in your front yard, down your side yard, like over 100 feet. Just walk right into your backyard, right into your curtilage, right into the, most intimate parts of your house. And, yeah, just hang out and, do whatever they want. And, yep, that's how it all started. March 28, 2024 is how it all started. That's when it all started. 29 days after I moved in. So, I don't know. Once you start looking at the context a little bit, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, that makes more sense now, instead of just, oh yeah, this guy just went rogue all of a sudden. Just randomly. He lived in the city of Wayne for over a year, never was even accused of anything at all. And then boom, one day, now he went rogue, And it's like, yeah. Or there's more to the story. Much more to the story. I'll leave it for you guys to decide. But yeah, Phantom Ordinance, I don't believe anyone in the history of the world has ever served over 30 days in jail for a Phantom Ordinance. Don't think so. Never heard of such a thing. Never have I heard of such a thing. I've never heard of a Phantom Ordinance being enforced. And then when you refuse a Phantom Ordinance, you're prosecuted. Never heard of such a thing. Of course, you know, I haven't heard of a lot of things. And, you know, the closest thing that I've ever heard of this would be Gold versus Simons, Gould versus Simons, Symons, 2002, Saginaw, Michigan. I mean, that's not involving anything like a fire or anything, but it's same type of deal. Except in that case, you know, they at least tried to give them some notice of some sort. I mean, like I said, it's much worse than people realize. It's a lot worse than what people realize. It's case law violations on steroids is what it is. It's repugnant to the Constitution of the United States, and it's repugnant to all of our case law in this country. May 19th and June 3rd, especially, February 28th, 24. I mean, it's all. I mean, you look at 5 instances. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty bad. That's pretty hard to argue that that's not targeted and retaliatory. And like I said, it all comes back. Karma has a way of repaying you. So what goes around comes around. And, you know, we're going to keep up the good fight because that's what we do. We don't quit. Winners never quit and quitters never win. So if I fall, I get back up and do it all again. But yeah, it's definitely been I've learned some things. I've learned some things in the last couple months. I've learned that. Well, I'll save that for another video. But yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate the continued support. It will not be in vain. And we will be back kicking very soon. Thank you and have a good night.